Morning. Good morning, Moshe. Good morning, Mr. Minsky. Good morning, Mike. Okay, we're holding here in the Gemara Mesechta Megillah. Daf Chavav Amud Bais 26b. And if you have your art scroll, it's 26b4. Something which is non-usable anymore, how can it be repurposed? How can it be reused? Something, for example, in Aron Kodesh, we spoke about could be used for a bima. We spoke about the cover, the mantle of a Sefer Torah. Could it be used to make a tachrichim? And we said halacha is it is allowed to be used to be repurposed as tachrichim. Now we're going to go into what do you do with a Sefer Torah that is no longer usable. Here, art scroll. Here's a Gemara. There's one open right here. 26 before. What do you do? Good morning, Rebbe Shmuel. With a Sefer Torah that is no longer able to be used for many different reasons. Many times you have the older Sefer Torah, the quality of the parchment was not so great because they weren't able to process it, or the quality of the ink was not so great. My grandfather in Russia, he bought an old Sefer Torah from someone during World War II. The person needed money. That person needed money to bury someone else who was a mes mitzvah, who passed away, who had no family. So they sold the Sefer Torah and they used the money to bury the person. And there was a problem with every single zayin, I think, in the Sefer Torah. So if for whatever reason you have a Sefer Torah which is not usable anymore, what do you do with it? Well, I'll tell you one thing you're not supposed to do with it, according to halacha. You're not supposed to put it into a museum case and put it on display.
Like in the JCC.
Many places, the JCC has it. Many places all over the world, Sefer Torah is something of kedusha. It's not meant to be on display.
Actually, Rabbi Langer had said that it's like imprisoned over there in the JCC.
You can say that, and it's not just the JCC. You have many Jewish museums throughout the world which have a similar thing. So where do you put it? Amar Rava says Rava, Sefer Torah Shabbalah. If you have a Sefer Torah which has become worn out and now is no longer able to be used, you have to put it into Geniza, into Shemus. And same thing, not just a Sefer Torah, also Nevi'im and Ksuvim. And more than that, anything which is Torah written on it is the same thing. So any Gemaras, old Svarim, old Chumashim, old Svarim of the Chassidus, all of these things you're not allowed to burn, you're not allowed to dispose of them, and all of these things have Hashem's name on it. And it says that some of the poskim that it's even a prohibition from the Torah to throw it out. It says there's a mitzvah to destroy idols in Eretz Yisrael. And then it says, Lo yisasum kein l'Hashem melekechem, do not do so to Hashem. The Sefer Mitzvah, Rambam says that it's actually a lav. If somebody throws out a Sefer, it's desecrating Hashem's name.
It's the Rambam said, right?
The Sefer Mitzvah, yes, of the Rambam.
Throws out meaning...
Take an old Chumash and throw it in the garbage.
Oh, okay, obviously that.
Correct. So our Gemara is telling us the source of that. And any old Svarim, the post can add on.
What's the problem with displaying the Sefer Torah at the JCC?
Because it has Hashem's name on it. And Hashem's name is, Kavod Hashem has to be, Sefer Torah has to be put away into an Aron Kodesh, only taken out at special times. It's not a history book. It's not a museum. You could bury it. So where's the best place to bury a Sefer Torah? So the Gemara says, Eitzel Talmid Chacham. The best place to bury a Sefer Torah is to put it next to the resting place, a burial place of a Talmid Chacham, of a Torah scholar.
Is it proper to put the same box
Uh-huh.
for him with the person.
Yeah, definitely. It's been done before. People putting shemus inside of the Aron together with people. The Aron, the box itself, I think we discussed it in the car on the way. The box itself is not necessarily a Jewish. It's not according to the Torah. The main thing is just a person. In Eretz Yisrael, they don't use a box; they use just a talis. Yeah, but I've definitely heard of people putting shemus into the box, into the coffin. So bury them next to a Talmid Chacham. It's brought down in Zechrenis and the Lubavitcher Rabbi's memoirs that they used to have a special spot for every single year. They would bury the shemus once a year in the towns, in Jewish towns, and every year that one person they would choose to be buried next to the shemus of that year. It would be like a special sort of honor to be buried next to the shemus of that year. Now, it doesn't have to be a Torah scholar who's on the caliber of a Rosh Yeshiva. Afilu sheina halachas, even if someone who just knows how to learn, study halacha on the Mishnah and the Brisa, but is not a Rav, is not a rabbi, does not know how to find the halachic ruling from the Mishnah and the Brisa, even they are considered to be a Torah scholar, and a Sefer Torah can be buried next to them. Amar of Acha bar Yaakov uvechlicheres. Acha bar Yaakov adds on, is that when you bury a Sefer Torah, you should put it into a type of container where it will last for a long time. Because it is, after all, Hashem's name, and you don't want it to decompose. The point of putting away, of burying, is not necessarily you want it to decompose. When a person is buried, you want to them to return to the earth. Allah for ata, Allah for tashuv. You were born from the earth, you return to the earth. Burying a shemus and burying the Torah books is not necessarily that you want them to decompose. Rather, they want to just respectfully put them away in a place where everyone will respect them. So you put them into a cemetery where people respect the cemetery. But it doesn't have to be buried. And there's genizas, many old shuls in the attic of the shul, on top of the Aron Kodesh, or in trucks somewhere in upstate New York, trailers sitting in the middle of the woods somewhere. That is also a valid geniza. And many old Sfarim collectors and wheelers and dealers, and they traveled to a lot of these old genizas and found tremendous things.
And historians actually find a wealth of information about Jewish people.
Correct.
From long ago.
We have the Hershel geniza, the geniza which we learned a lot about the Baal Shem Tov, Rebbe Baal Shem, and the Maggid Mizrich, the Alter Rebbe from the city of Kherson. And genizas are, you can say, a very integral source, very important source of Jewish history.
Can I tell a story with Rabbi Altein al Shalom?
Sure.
Yes, the Torah one afternoon, mincha time, somebody, Rabbi Altein said that he was in Israel, and by the Kotel, and someone came up and wanted to sell him a Sefer Torah. So the guy said he would be interested, and he said $2,000. So he bought the Sefer Torah and brought it back to America and had it in his car and wanted to show it to Rabbi Altein. So Rabbi Altein, he didn't encourage him to, but he was so excited. He went to the car, and we looked at each other, and we said, "Oh boy, he probably bought a Sefer Torah, a paper Sefer Torah, But he bought in a small Sefer Torah. We put it on the big one, opened it up. The kasav was gorgeous,
Really,
and clear, etc. But the whole Sefer Torah was filled with wormholes. So wow. It was like it was shreklich. It was a beautiful kasav. It was nice, but it was filled with wormholes. So Rabbi Altein suggested to him that this is such a special Sefer Torah that he should just use it on Simchas Torah to dance with, and that's what he should do with it. He should just dance with it on Simchas Torah. The guy went away happy. So that's my shahaya.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is Rabbi Yisrael Altein, Alva Shalom.
Yeah.
What's this story?
There was somebody who came to Rabbi Altein and wanted to sell him a Sefer Torah that he had. and ended up being a beautiful, beautiful Sefer Torah. But there are just many holes, wormholes inside of the Sefer Torah. And it wasn't able to be, it wasn't kosher. So Rabbi Altan suggested that he use it every year on Simchas Torah to dance with. Again? That's a story that Reb Label Eshrin just said.
There's no problem dancing with the puzzles.
Yeah, there's many Sefer Torah and many shuls that are puzzle. That's the time of the year they're all taken out. They all get to dance. Just because they're not kosher, it doesn't mean you can't be happy with it and joyous with it.
Rabbi, would the wormholes make the Torah loaded with tuma?
Good question. Would a wormhole make a Torah loaded with tuma? It's a very good question. You're speaking about a tuma from like the ones we learned about, that the Torah scroll makes your hands tameh, the one we learned about the Mesechta Tainis. So, interesting question. Because the whole reason they said a Sefer Torah makes your hands tameh is because they used to store the bread and the loaves of truma next to in the Aron Kodesh, next to the Sefer Torahs, and say this is holy and that is holy. And then the worms would come to eat the bread, and then they would also, they would eat they would make holes in the Sefer Torah. They would invalidate the Sefer Torah. So, yeah, probably. It's a good question. I'm assuming so.
Because I know there was wood that was offered on the Mizbeach, and
Right.
if it had worms in it, they couldn't use it.
Right. We learned that also. Kindness. Right, because it doesn't burn as well. It means it has moisture if it has worms. And for the Beis HaMikdash, you have to have only the very, very best. It had to be completely dry. But are you saying the reason why it couldn't be brought is because it had tumah, because of the worms? Couldn't be brought on the Mizbeach? Because of tumah, not because of the quality of the wood?
No, I thought the worms did confer some type of tuma to the wood.
Right. As far as I know, worms are not one of the 7 shrutzim, the 7 dead creepy crawlies which confer tumah. The Torah lists off 7 of them. As far as I know, worms are not among them. Maybe a dead worm could confer some type of tumah, but a living worm, as far as I know, will not really confer tumah. How to and we should put it into a earthenware kli cheres, an earthenware vessel. Shnemer, as it states, this is going to be the Haftarah in 2 weeks from now in Parshas Bahar. It's a very interesting story. You had a prophet of doom. Which prophet was that? Yirmiyahu. And Yirmiyahu, he was prophesying how Yerushalayim, the holy city, was going to be destroyed, and King Tzidkiyahu was going to be captured by Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Bavel, and he will be in prison in Bavel for the rest of his life until he dies. Now, the Jewish people, we learned previously in this Mesechta, they went through several periods of getting along, rebelling, getting along, peace, rebelling with the Babylonians, until they finally came and destroyed the entire Beis HaMikdash. And the last 4 kings, after Yeshayahu, were not tzaddikim at all. And Tzidkiyahu, who was the last king, was not a tzaddik when he was a king. Later on in prison, he did tshuva and became a very great tzaddik in prison. And he passed away in prison in Bavel. And his son eventually was, after Nebuchadnezzar died, his son was released from prison. And his son was Zerubbabel, which led many Jews back to Eretz Yisrael. Now, Tzidkiyahu, when he was king, and he didn't want to hear any detractors. Now, being a dictator, you could shut down any dissenting opinions. So he took Yirmiyahu, the prophet, who everyone knew was a Navi, a prophet. He had over a 40-year track record at that point of being a Navi of Hashem, and he threw him into prison. He was too scared to kill him, but so he threw him into prison, saying that this person, all he's doing is saying things I don't want to hear. telling me things like, do teshuvah, Hashem will destroy the city, you're not going to be king. And everything that Yirmiyahu said came to pass. That the king of Bavel came and made a siege on Yerushalayim. And the siege of Yerushalayim already started. And Yirmiyahu was still in prison. And he was in prison all the way through to the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. And only after the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash and Tzidkiyahu was already blinded and his sons killed, did Nebuzaradan, who was Nebuchadnezzar's general, he freed Yirmiyahu from prison, and he says, I want you to go free. You're a free person. You said good things about the Babylonians in the past, and you go free. And he says, no, I want to join my people, and Hashem, and he joined the Jewish nation until Hashem, Yirmiyahu, going into exile, until Hashem commanded him to go back. He says, I'll give you a choice. Either you join them in Galus, in exile, and I will stay in Eretz Yisrael, or you stay in Eretz Yisrael, and I will join you in exile. Yirmiyahu eventually went to Mitzrayim. I think he passed away and is buried in Mitzrayim, in Egypt. So a very peculiar thing takes place while Yirmiyahu is in prison. Hashem comes while he's in prison and gives him a nevuah, a prophecy, a vision, and Hashem tells him to Yirmiyahu that you have a relative whose name is Hanamel, and everything's going to be here up on the screen. Hanamel ben, whatever his father's name is, Hanamel ben Shalom. He was a relative of Yirmiyahu, and he owns a field, and he's becoming older, and he doesn't have anyone to inherit the field, so he wants to sell you the field, but the field should stay in the family's possession. So Hashem told Yirmiyahu, while you're in prison, Hanamel ben Shalom will come to sell you his field. You should buy the field for full price, even though we're in the middle of a civil war, in the middle of a war going on, and there's a siege in the city, and everyone knows it's pretty much a matter of time until we go into Galus. And you yourself know, you've been prophesizing for years that the Jewish people won't have any property, any real estate in the land of Eretz Yisrael, because they're all going to be exiled. Still, you should buy this property, this field from Hanamel, and pay full price for it. And sure enough, very shortly after, who shows up to visit him in prison? His relative Hanamel. And it says Hanamel also had a vision from Hashem. Maybe they're all in the family. They had visions from Hashem. And Hanamel comes and tells him, I have a field and I have a divine instruction from Hashem to propose that maybe you want to buy the field. Do you want to buy the field? And it was in public, in the prison yard. And although it was a very strange type of sale, because everyone's, the things are about to go down.
It looks like a Michigan sale, right?
How do you have money in jail to buy?
That's another question. I'm sure he found money. I don't know exactly how that happened. maybe he borrowed from everyone. I don't know. So they agreed. They wrote a contract. They brought witnesses. They weighed 80 pieces of silver, and he gave it to Hanamel. He signed the property, and he did it in front of everyone in the prison courtyard. And then he gave the documents to his Talmud, Baruch ben Uriah. And right after the sale was done, so it's written over here in Chabad.org in English, but we'll look at the inside over here. And here's a pasuk. Here's a verse. While he's in prison over here, it's very interesting to read at any rate, learn at any rate. While he's in prison, Hashem tells him, go buy the field. And he wrote the bill of sale, signed it, took witnesses. He weighed the silver on a scale. And they did it in the prison courtyard in front of everyone. Everyone there was witnesses to make sure that it was legal. He gave it to his student Baruch, and in front of all the Jews who were in prison together with him. After he did it, he says, I told Baruch ben Uriah, I told him, this is what you should do. So says Hashem. He reveals another nevuah he received from Hashem. I want you to take these documents and to preserve them for a very long time. How should you preserve them? By putting them, put them into an earthen vessel, so they should remain preserved for many, many years. And then Yirmiyahu explains his explanation of the entire reason of this nevuah, why Hashem told him to do it. It's very interesting. There's Mefarshim which say that Yirmiyahu was looking for a glimmer of hope. And he says, if Hashem is telling me to sell a field, maybe things will still turn around for the better. But later on, Hashem told him that's not what's happening. But the reason why I'm telling you to sell a field is because I want people to see and to know that you will return to this land and you will own fields, you will buy fields and sell fields. And you're writing it now that you should know that when the Jewish people come back in 70 years, back to the Holy Land, the document will still be around, and it's a proof of sale, a proof of purchase, and you should keep it in a earthenware vessel. And so it's an encouragement for the Jewish people. All right, that's the gist of the nevuah of Yirmiyahu. But we see from there that a earthenware vessel, a clay vessel, keeps something for a very long time. And over here on the screen, you'll see these are the famous Dead Sea Scrolls, right? They were found in the Judean caves in the desert. The temperature was very good, and they're all found in jugs, in clay jugs, because these preserved this for a very long time. Yeah, Qumran caves. There was a Bedouin shepherd who just found some of these scrolls laying around, and he went and he sold them to friends, and the friends decided to sell them in the market, and some collectors found out about it, and then from there, eventually they got around.
It's interesting is that actually Yirmiyahu said the same thing to Hashem, which the Moshe Rabbeinu said, and actually Moshe Rabbeinu said to Hashem, Hashem says you're going to be actually feeding.
Yeah.
And he's going to be feeding. He says, how when Hashem says is the head of Hashem too short? Yirmiyahu was having a similar thing. Hashem is telling me, as far as actually, to do stuff. How? Right? And he says for Hashem says the same thing.
Correct.
Right? My power limited. No.
Right. Here on the screen is Chabad.org tells you these are just a lot of different types of jugs found in Qumran. That's a area where they found it. Here's another jug, completely sealed. It was found again in Qumran. This is more recently, 2010. See the jug completely sealed. They left it closed. They just did some X-rays, and they found inside charcoal and ink or alabaster and different types of things. So all these, so we see that a earthenware vessel was the best method of preserving back then. Best method of preservation. So a Sefer Torah does not need to decompose, but rather just needs to be put away, and it could be preserved. If it's preserved, so even when you're burying it, put it into a earthenware clay vessel. Person obviously cannot be put into a thing which decomposes, which is not decompose, which is a very big thing which happens today. Especially people which are killed in accidents, and as someone is a Chaver Kadisha, you can understand that. They have what's called plastic bags, and if the person's in a plastic bag, they could be complete for many, many, many years, which Torah says not to. So Shenemer Nesatim Klicheres Laman Yamdu Yam Rabim, you should put the Sefer Torah into an earthenware container in order that it should last for a very long time. You have the explanation of Chassidus that the earthenware is cheapest type of material, and because it has bittul, doesn't feel itself great, it's able to preserve things. Similar story, there was a Beshua ben Chananya, I think, who was very deformed. And so the daughter of a Roman emperor asked him, why did you're so wise, so much wisdom, why did Hashem make you look so ugly?
Very, very interesting.
Well, she was able to ask such questions. And so he said Hashem wanted to hide the good things in packages like this. He says, still, it's not right. So he realized that she's not going to understand what is any explanation. So he says, tell me, do you have wine by your dinners in the palace? She says, of course, we have the best wine in the kingdom. He says, and how are they kept? So they're kept in clay jugs. He says, what? You can't afford better jugs? Can't afford golden jugs? Golden barrels? It's an embarrassment for the kingdom. She says, you know what? You're right. and she went and she made an order to change all of the jugs and all the barrels that are made out of clay and make them gold. And a few days later, when they're serving wine at a royal banquet, and the wine tastes off, and the king demands, "What's happening?" And they say, "Your daughter said that we should change it to golden containers, golden jugs." And the king gets very angry and he says, "Why do you do this? Who are you to get involved in this?" She says, "It's not me. It's Rabbi Tzvi who said this." So he called Rabbi Tzvi over and said, "Did you tell my daughter to do it?" They said, "I didn't tell your daughter to do it. I just told her, why not?" So she should realize when things are in golden containers, something could go wrong. When things are in clay, something simple, then will be preserved.
Yeah, and I remember first thing to the Gemara, says, "Well, what about Rabbi Shmuel? If he was the right, he was handsome." And so the Gemara answers, and imagine how much wiser he would have been if he wasn't so handsome.
Right. What's more holy, a Bais Knesset or Bais Medrash? A house of study or a house of learning?
Ooh.
A house of davening. Back nowadays, it's very intermixed. Most study, most Bate Medrash, most places of learning, they have minyanim there every single day, and it's
Papa said that we could do that.
so, right. So correct.
Make a really orange sheet.
There are some places, some in Garden Heights, and if you go to Hershel, they have a tremendous shul, and the same size of a shul, they have a tremendous Bais Medrash. And one of the rules of the Bais Medrash is that there's no minyanim allowed inside. Only for learning, people should be able to walk in 24 hours a day and learn.
Oh.
No minyanim allowed inside of the Bais Medrash. It's its own building, just as big as a shul, Hershel, correct? Humongous. Many places have a Bais Medrash and a Bais Knesset. Some places have just shul. Some places are just learnings. And nowadays, most people are multi-use because our shuls are inside of the city. Back then, the shuls were usually outside the city, outside in the fields. And the Bate Medrash, the houses of study, were inside the city. And people used to go outside of the city in order to daven with a minyan. Otherwise, they would daven at home. So which one is a greater kedusha? Could I repurpose a shul to a house of study, Bais Medrash? Could I repurpose a Bais Medrash to a Bais Knesset to a shul? So this is the next Gemara. We'll start it. It's not long. Amar Rav Papi Mishmei Rava. Rav Papi says in the name of Rava, Mi Beiknishta Lebei Rabbanon Shari. To convert a building from a shul into a study hall is allowed because he holds that the holiness of a house of study is greater than the holiness of a shul where everyone davens. And you're only allowed to make things go up, receive more kedusha. And he says you cannot demote and you cannot take it from a house of study to a house of davening because you cannot demote from kedusha. And this applies whether they wanted to make it into a shul or sell the Bais Medrash and have a shul with it. And Rav Papa Mishmei Rava Masni. Rav Papa said the exact opposite, that the holiness of a shul is greater than the holiness of a Bais Medrash, a place of davening. Amar Rav Acha says, we'll get to the reasoning behind both of these soon. Kavase de Rav Papa Mistabra. De Rav Papi Mistabra. We're turning the page to Chaf Zayin Amid Aleph 26. We're just finishing 26. Go to 27a, and we'll come back on Monday. We'll start with a little quiz on Daf Chavav, so you could review it in order to be ready for it on Sunday, on Monday. Kavase de Rav Papi Mistabra. It stands to reason that we ruled in accordance with Rav Papi that the holiness of a house of study is greater. The Amar Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi Bais Knesset Mutar L'Asosei Bais Medrash, because we learned from Yeshua ben Levi that a Bais Knesset, a house of davening, you're allowed to make it into a Bais Medrash, and therefore a Bais Medrash, a house of learning Torah, is greater than a house of davening. Shema Mina. From here we learn the Gemara concludes that indeed that is the halacha. Now, what is the reason why one should be holier than the other? They're both places of holiness. So here's a reason why the Bais HaKnesses, the house of davening, should be holier. We say Kedusha, Kodesh, 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 with a minyan. Right? You mention Hashem's name with a bracha, with a minyan. In the Bais HaKnesses, in the house of davening. And it's a place where you take out the Torah, you read it, you say Hashem's name over and over in a shul. So therefore, you would think to say, it would make sense to say that a shul is holier than a house of study. On the other hand, a house of study is where people are there the entire day and learning Torah. A Bais HaKnesses, a shul, people are not there the whole day. They're there early in the morning to daven, and then again by Mincha Ma'ariv, and then they leave. And so in the times when people had exclusive Bais Medrashes and exclusive Bais HaKnesses, there's reasons, to say that each one is holier than the other. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, where he says that a Bais HaKnesses is allowed to become a Bais HaMedrash, so you're allowed to take a shul and make it into house of study, he holds that it's perhaps not necessarily does he hold one is greater than the other, but rather the Sfas Emes explains that he holds that they're both equal and they're both, except that what you do is tadir, what you do more common, more often. Not necessarily do we know which one is greater, which one has a greater level of Kedusha. In order to avoid any of these problems today, if you do build a house that's exclusively a shul, or you have a place that's exclusively a Bais Medrash, when you make the room, you make the place, you say in the beginning a condition that we can repurpose the room for whatever we desire. Right now, it's not owned by the shul, it's being used by the shul, and we can repurpose it later for whichever idea, for whichever thing we want.
Does it have to be that one is greater than the other? And they could both be holy and interchangeable?
Right. But we want to know, could you make one into the other or sell one to make the other? If they're equal, then you could interchange.
So that's my opinion.
You're saying that they're equal.
It's not written here.
It's not written here. So that's the two things. You go to the one where you're there the entire day, and also the Brisi Yom V'Layla. Hashem said that you need to have Torah learning 24 hours around the clock, or do you say that it's the place where you say Hashem's name in the Kedusha, and that's what's most important? But we'll pause the Gemara here, do a few more halachas in Kisar Shulchan Aruch together with some Hasidic tales and stories.
So it sounds like you cannot repurpose a Bais Knesses to become a Bais Tefillah.
A base, again, because the Knesset and the Bais Tefillah are the same, mean a Bais HaMedrash to a Bais.
A Bais Medras to become a Bais Tefillah.
Correct. Right. The halacha is like Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. That you cannot repurpose it. The Kedusha of a Bais HaKnesset, of Bais HaMedrash, a house of studying, is greater. It's interesting. The Rebbe would always call 770 many times, not always, many times, Bayishim Gadlin by Torah, Bayishim Gadlin by Tefillah. A house where they have a lot of Torah, and a house where they have a lot of Tefillah. Meaning that the Torah came first, that the more important aspect is that's a house where you have a much Torah, and it's also the house where you have much Tefillah. And it will be saying it's interesting that he just uses the same terminology here as a Gemara. We're holding here in Sif Hey. Mitzvah kal adam. It's a mitzvah for every single person. Even if they have many helpers in their house. Davar. A person should do something in their house to prepare for Shabbos. Besides, we're just staying out of the way. And we bring several examples of different Amirayim. Rav Chisda would cut up the salad, cut the vegetables very thin. Rabbi Rav Yosef and Vakim Eitzim, Rabbi Rav Yosef, they would chop wood. Imagine Rav Yosef is blind and going to chop wood. Rebbe Zera would light the fire. Wasn't as simple as just turning on the knob. If you would do just that, maybe there'll be. Reb Nachman would clean the house. Setting up the Shabbos table, taking away the weekday things. Every single person should learn that they should follow in Shabbos and prepare for Shabbos. And shouldn't say, I'm not going to do I'm not going to dishonor myself to prepare for Shabbos. This is the greatest honor that you could do of preparing yourself for Shabbos. This one we did already previously, so we'll go back and we'll skip it. The reason why it's called Erev Shabbos, the eve of Shabbos, Erev comes from the word taruvas. You know what taruvas means?
Mixture.
Mixture, right. You have areva is a big mixing bowl where you mix the dough. On Friday is when you have a mix of Shabbos and weekday. You have a weekday in Erev Shabbos, and Shabbos again comes in. And that's why we say Yom HaShishi v'chul Hashemayim on Friday, the sixth day, and Hashem completed. We go from one into the other. Friday is the one connecting, and there's a certain in Yiddish, when you say Friday night, you say Freitag Nacht. And you say Matzah Shabbos, you say Shabbos Nacht, even though it makes sense to say the other way around. Because Shabbos, Matzah Shabbos is part of Sunday, really, and Friday night is part of Shabbos. But we want to join the Kedusha of the weekday and the Kedusha of Shabbos to come together. Go to Sif Zayin. Yachin Basar v'dagim v'yafim mat'amim v'yayim v'shubach v'yichalter. A person should prepare as much as possible to have food, fish, meat, as much as you could afford. He hider mitzvah, Alter Rebbe adds on the word hider. The way to beautify a mitzvah is lecha b'chal suda misudis Shabbos dagim. To eat fish at every single Shabbos meal. And the Alter Rebbe actually adds on in the Siddur that if you only have enough fish for one meal, you should eat it by Shalosh Shudas, by the third meal, as opposed to eating it because it's a mitzvah more than the other ones. If a person is able to eat fish, but if fish is harmful for the person, then they don't have to. If he doesn't enjoy it, or if it's harmful, you don't have to. Shabbos is given for pleasure, not to pain oneself. Now, v'yashchis is a sakin. We mentioned this is a minute. Many people sharpen their knives on Erev Shabbos, and we explain pesach es yadecha. The last letters are ches taf chaf, ches taf, which means chatach, cutting, which is a malach on parnasa. Gam kem kavet Shabbos. It's an honor for Shabbos, and it's a school for parnasa. V'takin is a Bais, and this is a school for shalom Bais. If you clean the house, v'takin is a mitzvah, and you make the beds. And you spread out the tablecloth to the Repurposing Kol Yom Shabbos, and to make sure that it's spread out the whole Shabbos. That's the way to honor Shabbos. Many people have a custom to put two tablecloths on. You know why? Because a man on Shabbos we had a double portion of man, and the man had two layers. There was a layer of dew underneath and a layer of dew on top. So here you have the challah, which is covered from a tablecloth on bottom and on top. But you do want to have also a second layer under that. It's his honor of the mun. I remember when we got married, my mother-in-law was very made sure we had two tablecloths, so we should always be able to cover with two different.
Put some food on the second layer.
On the what?
You put some food
In between the two? No.
No.
Many people have a minhag that on Erev Shabbos they lay down and take a little nap after the mikvah. Many tzaddikim would do this. They'd lay down. Now, not just because they were tired, but like we mentioned once the story of the Rebbe. Remember that person who was injured in a terrorist attack?
Yeah.
And the Rebbe every Friday by after the Chadodi, the Rebbe would put his, or before the Kabbalah Shabbos, the Rebbe would put his arm down and close his eyes, on his stender, except for when this person would come. It's al pi Kabbalah. Those who know Kabbalah would do it because it's called the time of Dermita, a time of sleep. And Rebbe Melech Lezensk would do it, and the Maggid Mizrich would do it, and our Rebbe would do it. It's important, of course, to go to the mikveh on Erev Shabbos, and it says the mikveh Friday morning is a lot different than the mikveh on Erev Shabbos. And he says those who go every single day, he promises them that they'll have a long life. Let's finish up this halacha. Let me just. Bitakin is yismach v'viyas Shabbos. Person should have simcha when Shabbos comes in. Waiting. Imagine you had an important guest coming. I will get everything ready to honor him. For Shabbos, the queen, I'm going to get ready. In some places, they make a pasteda. You know what that is in Yiddish? A kugel. It's called pasteda. And mulyasa is a different type of pie. I'm not sure exactly how it's made. And it was similar to the man, which was made covered over. And there were two layers of dew, one underneath, one on top. This is one of my favorite halachas. It's a mitzvah on Erev Shabbos to taste the food of Shabbos, and the Alter Rebbe adds on, it's a mitzvah to taste every single food that they made for Shabbos. You should taste it on Erev Shabbos if possible. The Rebbe explains that it's halacha in Shulchan Aruch. Torah says you have to taste your food in Erev Shabbos before Shabbos. Mashiach is called Yom Shekula Shabbos, a day which is completely Shabbos. And Mashiach comes, we won't have tremendous delicacies. The secrets of the Torah will be revealed to one and all. And therefore, we have to have a little taste of the food of Shabbos, and that's by learning Chassidus. By learning Chassidus, you're preparing for Mashiach. You're having a foretaste of what the Torah of Mashiach will be like. Okay, and with this, we will pause until next week, Monday. Tomorrow, Rabbi Darren's not going to be here, but we'll be online, and we'll have Shiur and Parshas Hashavua. Okay.